Welcome to the Valmika Property Investing Podcast, where I, your host, share the key to success in the Australian property investing market. I'm the founder of Valmika Buyers Agency. You can find us at valmikaproperty.com. The contents of this podcast are the personal opinion of your host and are intended for entertainment purposes only. Any financial advice must be obtained from your trusted financial advisor or a qualified professional. In this episode, we're going to speak on a topic we're very passionate about at Valmika, and that's on property auctions and the strategies for successful bidding. So the first section we're going to speak about is understanding property auctions. We'll then move on to the pre-auction preparation stage, which is a very, very important stage of the auction process. We'll then move on to bidding strategies, so the exciting stuff. We'll use this together with strategies on how to read the room. We will then move on to sticking to your budget and then the process after the auction. We will give you a rundown of the auction's clearance for this week of the 20th of August 2023 after the topic. So let's dive straight into it. So understanding property auctions. Property auctions are very common practice in Australia. Basically, there's a 6-week campaign where the property then goes to an auction process. The auction process is usually a very efficient way of selling property because it gives the seller closure in a certain time frame instead of the whole selling process taking weeks or even months. So it allows the seller to get to closure in a short time frame. And this can be a very successful process, especially in a hot market, because you bring the competition together and it gets emotional, as property often does. And it also works well in a bear market. So if a seller wants to get out of a property quickly and can't afford to let the selling process take weeks or even months, they will call an auction and then they will get a bidder at that auction and sell the property in a timely manner. At the auction, obviously, there's an auctioneer. The auctioneer works for the seller, and obviously the seller's agent works for the seller as well, and they work together. So it's important to keep in mind that as a buyer, the auctioneer and the sellers are obviously working for the seller's agent, that is, are working for the seller. Pre-auction preparation is a very, very important process. The way to view it is you don't go into an exam without having studied. If you don't study, you go into an exam, you're not going to perform well. And it's the same with auctions. So you need to prepare well before the auction. The preparation all starts with your due diligence on the area. So we research into the property. Your research is going to give you good factual information of what the property is valued at. You need to have a solid understanding of where the property is valued at. And this will prevent you from acting emotionally because you'll be acting on facts. The more facts you have, the better ammunition you'll have to equip yourself before going into the auction. It's also important to remember that when you bid at an auction, it's a contractual commitment. So you are committing to purchasing the property at that price. So it's very important to have your financing organized. You can't go to an auction, be the highest bidder, and then say, sorry, I didn't have my financing organized. I didn't have my debt financing. You are committed, contractually committed to buying that property. So having your financing is very, very important. And with your financing, you'll be able to set a realistic budget and a maximum bid. So it's very important that you stick to your maximum bid. You stick to the facts into this as a business transaction. You must keep away from the emotions as much as possible. And to do that, you have your facts from your research in place. You have your maximum bid in place through your financing as well. Then lastly, obviously there's many things you need to prepare from, but the three main ones, and this is the third one, is the contract. So you must have gone through the contract, the terms of the contract prior to the auction with your solicitor. Because once the hammer goes down and you're the highest bid, you are accepting or agreeing to the terms of that contract. So it's very important you go through that. Right, then moving on to bidding strategies. So there are three typical strategies, three main strategies that we see at auctions. They're broken down into conservative bidding strategies, aggressive bidding strategies, and then the incremental strategy. Now at Valmika, we use a combination of all three, but we'll tackle them individually first. So the conservative bidding strategy. So as the name implies, this involves bidding cautiously and gradually. It's best suited for buyers who want to secure property within a specific budget and overpaying. So let's take an example. Let's say you have a maximum budget of $500,000. The bidding starts off at $400,000, but you raise your bid slowly and calmly at $5,000 to $10,000 increments. So you prevent the auction running away from you. Obviously, this is dependent on competition and many other factors, but it's a slow, measured approach to showing your bids. Next is the opposite strategy. It's called the aggressive bidding strategy. In this strategy, it involves being assertive, it involves quick bidding, and this is designed to deter other bidders and show confidence. So this is a strategy in isolation that is for people who are, or for buyers who are confident about the property's value and who want to signal their intent. So let's take an example. So you're very interested in a property and you believe it's undervalued. You open with a strong bid close to the property's estimated value. You continue to bid aggressively, potentially even jumping ahead in larger increments. So when to use it? You use this when you're confident about the value and you want to deter the competition, and in scenarios when you want to make a bold statement to other bidders. Now, there's a time when to use this because this can become very dangerous because you can accelerate the bidding process and accelerate the jump of increments. As there's a time of when to use it, and there's a time of when to go conservative as well. And that brings us into the incremental approach. So this strategy it's a more advanced strategy. It includes reading the room. It includes understanding the competition that's in the room. It involves increments in terms of the speed at which you show your bid. It involves increments in terms of the price jumps of your bids. And it's all got to do with the perceived value of the property by the competition in the room that you're gauging with them. And at the stage of the auction, whether it's at the start of the auction, at the middle of the auction, or towards the end of the auction. And it involves an emotional read on the competition. So it's a more balanced approach that allows you to compete effectively without overpaying. So when to use it? So it's a more advanced strategy, and it's one that we use at Valmika. So we like to use a balanced approach between conservative, aggressive, and incremental. So the balance comes in when you want to balance the assertiveness with your caution. In scenarios where there's moderate competition, you want to secure the property at a fair price. So you don't go in as aggressively. When you get towards the end of an auction where the competition starts to wear out, you might want to become more assertiveness, but with smaller increments. Whereas at the beginning, you want to become more conservative, in your approach and try and keep the property amount down as much as possible at the beginning, because it usually tends to accelerate from at that point. This is obviously a much more involved strategy, and it's one that we can speak about in more detail in another podcast. So if you're interested in more live examples of how we use these strategies at the auctions and when to use them in different stages of the auction process, leave a note and I will do a podcast on this. So lastly, we want to speak to the importance of sticking to your budget during the process. So if we use an example, say you're the most successful bidder at an auction, and you go above your budget and you can't commit to it, you need to understand the ramifications of being in that situation. So as soon as you're the highest bidder and the auctioneer does his final strike and he strikes the hammer, you're committed. So you have to pay a deposit. That deposit you will lose if you don't go ahead with the deal. What else can happen is the contract makes you liable for damages to the seller. So not only would you lose the deposit, but when the seller goes back to the market, and let's say, for example, you showed a $10 million bid, and that was the most successful and highest bid at the auction, and you couldn't commit to it, then the seller has to go back to the market to sell the property, and they get a $9 million bid. They can sue you for the difference between 9 million and 10 million. So they can sue you for that $1 million, together with you having lost the deposit, and they can sue you for the legal expenses. So when you think of your budget and your maximum bid before going into an auction, you need to understand that you need to stick to that and don't go above it. All right, so moving on to the auction results for the week ending 20th of October 2023. New South Wales, another strong showing, 75% clearance rate, with Sydney clearing at 77.5%. Then Victoria also a strong clearance rate, up from last week. So Victoria stayed clearing at 72%, with Melbourne clearing at 72.7%. Western Australia improving quite a bit this week. So a clearance of 66.7%, with Perth clearing at 62.5%. South Australia is still the strongest clearance rate in the country at 75%, and Adelaide clearing at 76%. Queensland coming in above last week, around 6% higher than last week, so 63.7% clearance rate, and Brisbane clearing at 69%. I hope this episode was insightful and it added value. If you would like more detail on auction bidding strategies, drop a note and I will gladly go into a more detailed podcast on it. See you in the next one. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Valmika Property Investing Podcast. I hope you found our discussion insightful and empowering. If you are interested in finding out more about our services at Valmika Buyers Agency, visit our website at valmikaproperty.com. There you'll discover how we can assist you in making informed decisions and achieving your property goals. See you on the next episode.